Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 6th of November and we are going to deal with two very important topics which are in news. The first topic is the Adaptation Gap Report. Adaptation Gap Report is released by United Nations Environment Programme annually. Now, to understand this or the content of this report, we need to understand first what adaptation is and then what adaptation gap is. Both of these definitions, as per the report, have been covered in this topic. So, when we come to this topic, we'll see the definition of both of these concepts and basically what are the findings of this report of 2023. The second topic we're going to cover is Devas Antriksh deal. This deal between Devas, a private entity, was done with Antriksh, which was, a marketing arm of ISRO. This deal was done in the year 2005. But in 2011, ISRO called off this deal. As a result, Devas filed multiple lawsuits against ISRO, that is Government of India, in various international tribunals because there were some foreign investors in Devas who were not happy with the cancellation of the deal, obviously. Coincidentally, all the cases filed against Government of India in this cancellation of this deal, in the aftermath of the cancellation of the deal, were in favor of those private investors. Means Government of India had to pay a compensatory amount to those entities. This deal was in news because Government of India has requested one of the district courts in The Hague, Netherlands, to annul the grant of funds by Government of India to those private entities. The fund amounting to $111 million. So this is why this was in news. In this particular topic, we'll see the entire scenario, what happened, what was the deal for, what happened in the cancellation of the deal, why the deal was cancelled, and what happened in the aftermath of the cancellation of the deal. That will give you a complete picture of this particular topic, which is often seen in news. So let us get started with the first topic, the Adaptation Gap Report. Adaptation can be defined as or can be understood as our efforts which make us in line or closer to modifying our actions in order to adapt to the worsening situation due to climate change. For example, we need electricity. Earlier we were producing electricity by burning coal. Now we are producing, or we are wanting to produce more and more electricity by renewable energy. That is how we are adapting to the situation. We were using, I would say, less cleaner fuels earlier. Now we are using or trying to use more cleaner fuels. Another example of adaptation is when COVID came. In that scenario, we did not know how to deal with it. Now, till the time cure was being found for COVID, or a vaccine was being developed, the authorities all over the world, they advised to use a mask. Using a mask was, I would say, kind of an adaptation technique where people were made to adapt to the situation, to the worsening situation. So this is what technically adaptation means. Adaptation gap, on the other hand, let's suppose these much efforts are required to do adaptation, but we are able to do these much efforts only. So this gap is called as adaptation gap. This gap can be due to multiple factors. Lack of political will make you do less efforts. Lack of funds will make you do less efforts. Lack of expertise, lack of knowledge will make you do less efforts. But the efforts required are of this level, you are able to do of this level. That is adaptation gap. So in this 2023 report, The theme of Adaptation Gap Report 2023 was Underfinanced, underprepared. Means the world is underfinanced right now. Lack of funds is not letting the adaptation, I would say, activities to be of this level. That is why this gap is there. So let us look into the details of this report. Now it has been published annually by United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. It is co-produced by UNEP, Copenhagen Climate Center, UNEP CCC, and the World Adaptation Science Programme, WASP. Here, by clicking on this link, you can go to that page where actually the report is. This link will take you to the website of UNEP. And once you open the report, you will see this as the first page of the report. Adaptation Gap Report 2023. Underfinanced, underprepared, inadequate investment and planning on climate adaptation leaves the world exposed. World exposed to more vulnerabilities. The world exposed to more disasters induced due to climate. The world exposed to more poverty and hunger induced due to climate change. This is what needs to be tackled. So, let us now get into the details more of this particular report. Definitions. Adaptation, first of all, it is the process of adjustment to actual or expected climate and its effects. In human systems, adaptation seeks to moderate or avoid harm, because if we adapt, then harms will be avoided or minimized, or exploit beneficial opportunities. In some natural systems, human intervention may facilitate adjustment to expected climate and its effect. This definition of adaptation is given by IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in 2022-21. Now, next is adaptation gap. The difference between actually implemented adaptation and a societally set goal. Now, the goal set is this, but actually you have done this. So this gap is called as adaptation gap. Now let us understand that this societally set goal, how this is set. Now we will try to link this emission gap with adaptation gap. Like there is this adaptation gap report, there is another report that is called as emission gap report. Because if there are more emissions, there will be more need for adaptation. If there are less emissions, there will be less need for adaptations. This is a simple logic and connectivity. Now, we have set a goal for ourselves as a society. In 2015, we set this goal. And that goal was by 2100, that is by the end of this century, the global average temperatures, let's suppose X degrees Celsius is the global average temperatures. Sorry, not the global average temperature is X degrees Celsius, but yes, the global average temperatures should be 1.5 degree above the pre-industrial level temperatures. Pre-industrial level temperatures are X degrees Celsius. Pre-industrial means the average temperature of 50 years from 1850 to 1900. The average temperature of these 50 years is, let's suppose, X degrees Celsius. From X degrees Celsius, we have to increase maximum 1.5 degrees Celsius. So X plus 1.5 degrees Celsius, this should be the global average temperature by the year 2100. This is a societally set goal in 2015 UNFCCC's COP21, that is Paris Pact, it is popularly called as. This was adopted during this summit, this COP, that by 2100 the global average temperature should exceed by 1.5 degrees Celsius only the pre-industrial level. That is the societally set goal. Now this climate change, this global warming or temperature rise is happening due to emissions. So if emissions are more, required is this to meet this goal, obviously there will be a gap. Emissions are more, adaptation will be required to be more. So adaptation gap is to meet a societally set goal, whatever adaptations you need to do and what adaptations you are doing. This is basically called as adaptation gap. Now we know what the societally set goal is. Ultimate target is to reach this much increase in temperature. Increase in temperature happens due to emissions. Emissions can be controlled by adaptations. So there is this linkage, and we have to create this linkage in our mind at least. So this is what adaptation gap report talks about. The findings. It is estimated that adaptation costs will increase significantly. Why adaptation costs will increase significantly? Because a lot of emissions are being done by the people, by the humans. Emission gap is also huge, means emissions done are this, emissions required are this to achieve that goal, x plus 1.5 degrees Celsius. And by 2050, this increased, I would say, costs will be there. The adaptation finance needs are 10 to 18 times as high as the current international public adaptation fund flows. Now here you need to know one more thing, that according to COP15 of UNFCCC, which happened in the year 2009, Copenhagen, the developed countries were mandated to invest $100 billion per year in developing or underdeveloped countries. And this is that fund which will be used by developing countries for, mitigating or reducing the emissions, adapting themselves for this purpose. But this fund is not enough. Adaptation gap is due to lack of funds. And lack of funds needs to be addressed. That is why it is saying that 10 to 18 times more it is required. The world countries must urgently cut greenhouse gas emissions also side by side. In 2021, funding from developed countries to developing countries for adaptation projects was 15% lower than the previous years, and it had to increase. Ideally, it should increase. Ideally speaking, there has been no year till now where $100 billion fund has come from developed countries to developing countries. Why from developed to developing countries it has to come? Because there is this concept of historical emissions. The global warming which we are facing today is due to the historical emissions done by the developed countries of today when they were developing. And the developing countries of today were not able to do anything at that time. Now is the time for developing countries to develop, and they cannot afford restrictions in emissions, because with emissions happens development also. So this is needed to be understood. It identifies 7 ways to bridge the adaptation gap, which include an increase in international finance flows. This is the major, and greater domestic mobilization of resources also. Also, it calls for a reform of the global financial architecture to ensure greater and easier access to finance for climate related purposes from multilateral agencies such as World Bank or the IMF. Means funds availability should be streamlined for this purpose, for climate change, for climate mitigation, global warming mitigation. This should not stop. Also, the countries all over the world, they are discussing new collective quantifiable goal. Earlier it was $100 billion per year, which obviously is not enough. In this NCQG, which will come out by 2024, this $100 billion is expected to increase. But how much is a big question mark. So let us see what happens. But it is one thing very clear, that adaptation gap is due to lack of finances. This is highlighted by this year's adaptation gap report. Now the Devas Antrix deal. The Devas Antrix deal was done between a private entity named as Devas and Antrix, that is the marketing arm of ISRO. This deal was done in 2005, in which S-band I would say, transponders would be given to or would be leased to Antrix, or would be leased by Antrix to Devas for a 12-year contract for 167 crore rupees. Devas would be using this frequency for transmitting multimedia services to the people. Obviously, Devas would be earning out of it. But in 2011, this deal was cancelled because S-band, as mandated by the government, had to be reserved for defense purposes. This is what the government said. Second of all, there was also mounting pressure on the government that you have leased it for 167 crore rupees, but it amounts to around 2 lakh crore rupees. Actual cost of leasing would have been this much. So you've leased it for too less to Devas. The deal was cancelled. And the aftermath of the cancellation of the deal, Devas, it approached multiple international tribunals because there were foreign investors in this company, Devas. And unfortunately, all those tribunals gave the judgment in favor of Devas. Means the government of India had to compensate because that was part of the deal. Now, the government of India, it was told to compensate $111 million to 2 or 3 Mauritius-based foreign investors. Apart from it, there was another foreign investor, that was Deutsche Telekom. It was a German major telecom company. For that, compensation was separate. But for these 3 Mauritius-based foreign investors, $111 million had to be given to them. For this particular award, Government of India now approached a district court in The Hague and said that please cancel this award. We don't want this. And Government of India had strengthened its case with the Supreme Court of India's judgment, which liquidated Devas Private Limited. But that district court has denied Government of India's request and said you will have to pay $111 million. So let us look into the detail of this particular thing which happened. The district court in The Hague, Netherlands has denied India's request to cancel $111 million compensation given to foreign investors in Indian satellite company called Devas Multimedia. This payment was awarded by United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, UN-CITRA Tribunal. And this deal was in 2005 with ISRO's Antrix Corporation. It got cancelled in 2011. The deal, Antrix Corporation, it was the commercial arm of ISRO, and Devas Multimedia Private Limited signed an agreement in January 2005. Under the deal, ISRO would lease to Devas 2 communication satellites, GSAT-6 and GSAT-6A, for 12 years. 167 crore rupees. Means, Devas would be paying Antrix, that is ISRO, 167 crore rupees and would be using these 2 satellites. Basically, S-band of these 2 satellites, S-band 70 megahertz. And why would it be using? It would be providing multimedia services to mobile platforms in India using the S-band transponders on the satellites. So that was the deal. But the deal was cancelled in 2011. Why was it cancelled? There were 2 reasons given by the Government of India. Actually, the reason given was one, but the second reason is an interpretatory reason. Let us look into the first reason. It was annulled by, in 2011, following a cabinet committee on security decision. Committee decided to terminate the agreement. Why? Because they cited that the requirement of the S-band spectrum for security purpose should be there, not for this multimedia purpose. And we cannot give the same band for multimedia purpose which we will be using for security purpose. So hello, Devas, this deal is cancelled. Also, there were allegations that Devas deal involved the handing over of communication spectrum valued at nearly 2 lakh crore. Actually, 167 crore rupees it was given. But there were, estimations that the actual worth of that for 12 years, of that lease for 12 years would have been 2 lakh crore rupees, and it is given for pennies to Devas. So that should not have been done. That was an interpreted reason. In 2014, CBI was asked to investigate the 2005 deal. Now in 2014, the new government has come. This was all happening during the previous government's regime. The ED, that is Enforcement Directorate, filed a charge sheet in 2018 under the Prevention of Money Laundering against former managing director of Antrix and 5 Devas officials. It stated that Devas transferred 85% of its 579 crore foreign funding to the US under various claims. So, a case of money laundering was filed. And in this case of money laundering, officials, or I would say the managing director of Antrix, that was a government arm, was also involved, clearly highlighting his involvement in that. Now, the aftermath of cancellation of the deal. What happened after the deal got cancelled? The foreign investors in Devas, they filed multiple lawsuits against Antrix, that is Government of India. So let us look into these things. They approached various international tribunals seeking compensation. These foreign investors were, who were the foreign investors? First was Deutsche Telekom, German telecom major it is. 3 Mauritius investors and Devas Multimedia itself. So these 3 were there. As a result, Devas Multimedia got $1.2 billion compensation by an international chamber of commerce. Deutsche Telekom was awarded $101 million compensation by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Geneva. And Mauritius investors were awarded $111 million by UNCITRAL. This is where the government of India now has challenged that we don't want to pay this, and to which the district court in The Hague, Netherlands, has rejected the appeal by India, government of India, for this particular compensation, $111 million. Liquidation of Devas also happened. The National Company Law Tribunal in India ordered liquidation of Devas Multimedia in May 2021, citing fraudulence in its creation. So it was liquidated. And this particular, I would say, judgment of NCLT was upheld by Supreme Court of India in January 2022. The Enforcement Directorate and Central Bureau of Investigation are currently pursuing cases of money laundering and corruption in India against Devas and its officials. And not only Devas, but also Antrix officials. The case of money laundering has been launched against him also. So this is what has happened. Then the case in UNCITRAL, UNCITRAL it is. In October 2020, 3 Mauritius-based investors in Devas Multimedia were awarded $111 million in compensation by United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. These 3 investors, CC Devas Mauritius Limited, Telecom Devas Mauritius Limited and Devas Employees Mauritius Private Limited. They were awarded compensation over the failed Devas Antrix satellite deal. How much compensation? $111 million. India's response: the Indian government approached the District Court of The Hague in March 2022 for cancellation of compensation award of 2020. And this is why, or this is where this district court rejected Government of India's plea. The government cited January 2022 Supreme Court order which upheld the liquidation of Devas Multimedia. That was there in January 2022, where Supreme Court of India said that yes, it should be liquidated because the formation of it was on, I would say, unlawful grounds. Fraudulence in its creation, and National Company Law Tribunal, Supreme Court upheld in January 2022. This we already saw. The Government of India cited this in that district court, that the Supreme Court of India is also saying this way, that it should be dissolved because it was formed in the wrong way. The Hague Court's response: the district court in Hague rejected the government's plea to consider this. And the court decided that India's accusations of deceit, fraud and corruption against Devas Multimedia were already addressed by the Hague's Court of Appeal. India had challenged an interim arbitral award for compensation, and these accusations were part of that case, which has already been dealt. So the district court is saying that I am not going to cancel this award of $111 million. You will have to pay to these three entities. So this is the case. This case frequently is in news because any development happens on this, you will see this case in news. And UPSC may also ask questions on this because one entity which is involved is ISRO in that case. ISRO means Government of India itself. So this is it from today's session. I will be meeting you now tomorrow with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.